We need to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's, I think, a battle that all of the startups and the direct air capture field fight together.
Reforestation is not the only solution, nor the most effective one, to capture CO2 out of the atmosphere. Today we dive right into the innovative tech to capture CO2 from the atmosphere and turn it into different uses, such as hydrogen. And
we also have partners who would use the CO2, for example, to make bricks for streets and to make, for example, also a backpack out of the CO2.
We talk with Friederike Reissig, lead chemist at Greenlyte, a startup which raised 10.5 million in a pre-Series A round earlier this year. They are on a decarbonization mission. Frederike has multiple years of experience researching advanced material usage for more sustainable and effective use in energy solutions. She's here today to share her knowledge. This is the Gen Z in STEM podcast. I'm your host, Mahadrin, and I hope you're as excited as I am. Let's get to it. Hi, Frederike. I'm very excited to talk to you today. So you have multiple years of experience in research on advanced materials related to usage in renewable energies, and you're currently a lead chemist at a startup that works with DAC technologies. So essentially tech to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to store or use. That's a pretty brief introduction. Do you want to tell everyone a bit more about yourself and who you are?
Sure. Thanks for the first introduction. So I basically started studying chemistry now 11 years ago. Then during the route or during the studies, I basically always had contact to renewable energy sources. And it started off with thermoelectrica, which are quite unknown to most people, where you can make use of waste heat and turn that into electricity. And then moving via other interesting topics and for example, the battery field, I'm now in a startup as lead chemist and responsible for all the chemistry that we handle and make that work. So that's, pretty exciting.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about your current role and so Greenlyte. So you work at Greenlyte and the technology you work on, the concept of the startup is sort of decarbonization technology that captures CO2 from the air and converts it through, more complicated processes to pure streams of oxygen, water, and also CO2. So for someone who's not familiar with this process, can you maybe briefly explain what's the process and why, what are the stakes and why is it important?
Sure. So direct air capture basically aims to take out the CO2 that we already exhausted into our atmosphere to efficiently reduce it even more than what trees can do, for example. I mean, trees and other plants do a very good job, but we've put so much CO2 in the atmosphere that we need additional help to get it out. And what we do is basically we have an absorbent that we bring in contact with the air that then takes up the CO2 in the first step. And then as an intermediate step, we have it stored as a salt so that we can decouple the absorption, so the uptake of CO2, and desorption. So when we release a pure gas stream of CO2, hydrogen, and oxygen. And in the second step, where we have an electrolysis setup, this is the energy intense process part. But here we can only let it run when there is renewable energies and sufficient amounts. So that's why we don't constantly need a lot of energy, but just when sun is shining and wind is blowing. And so that's pretty nice. And then, you have the pure gas streams afterwards.
Yeah. And so from this process, like you said, you get CO2 that's kind of just scattered everywhere in the air, and then you make it into a concentrated form. But you have three components. The first two, which can be made for hydrogen, but then for the carbon part, who do you guys work with, or how is that CO2 used?
So there are actually quite a lot of possibilities to use it. So one, of course, would be the typical case that you would generate fuels again, where you cannot decarbonize a system completely. So when you, for example, take a look at aviation, it is really hard to use batteries for aviation because everything above, for example, a flight of 20 minutes, the batteries would just be way too heavy. So there, like batteries are not an option, and we need alternatives like hydrogen, but in the meantime, probably also like other fuels. And so there are numerous ways where you cannot substitute everything. But of course, if you do that, the CO2 will be released again afterwards. And that's also what we want to avoid. So we also have partners or spoke to people who would use the CO2, for example, to make bricks for like the for streets, and to make for example also a backpack out of the CO2. So I think there are actually quite numerous ways that are coming up and evolving, with like for what you can do with the CO2. And I mean, one example that like the Germans like a lot is that you can also use it for like putting beer into bottles. So, but they actually don't need that much. But that's one of the like very very media intense examples. But yeah, you can for sure do a lot. And I mean, yeah, agricultures and using it for directly putting it into like greenhouses, it's another way of using it. So yeah, there are numerous ways to use it.
Yeah, for the beer example, that gets people's attention. But personally, because I study civil engineering, the brick one is like, more interesting to me because it's like you can use it for materials, so that's really cool. But now that we have a better overview of like what Greenlyte does and why it's valuable, like I'd like to go into like your role in this startup. You said you help with chemistry as a lead chemist, but you've been at Greenlyte for a bit more than a year and a half, and I've seen that's kind of around the time of the existence of like the startup. So you're quite an essential member at getting like all this tech running. So I guess in a bit more depth, like what do you do, and you and your team at Greenlyte, and what's your key inspiration in your work?
Yeah, so I actually joined almost at the start. I was the first woman to also join the startup. So that's it was quite interesting, because it's like being the first woman to join is of course not easy, but like the guys are all super fun and super open. So it was then still easy. And the technology itself, so Peter Bear, one of our co-founders, worked on it for quite a couple of years. And he has so many ideas, and basically what we're working on now is what he sees as most promising. But of course, we need to like, if you want to use something in an industrial context and build a plant around it, it's not just, okay, we know that it works, but we need to exactly know all the properties and where exactly it works and how exactly it works, and under which conditions. So can we use it from like -10 to +50 degrees C, or is there a more narrow window that we need to know? And like, what are all the like small details that we need to figure out to then actually get it into a plant where it's like fully functional? And I think this is a process that in industry can take quite an amount of years to go from like an idea to a finished plant. In my case, or in our case, and what my role is there then is to like really characterize our current absorbent, but also with that develop ideas on like where to go to next and what the future steps will be, and like how can we change the chemistry so that we can extend the temperature ranges, or it can extend, for example, relative humidity ranges, so that we can deploy our technology in like a broader environmental conditions, basically.
Okay, so like you guys are thinking, okay, now we think we have this tech and we're developing this tech. How can we like also be able to scale it in the future and like make sure more people in more regions like have access to it?
Yeah. So the goal is clearly to like really scale it up, because it's something, or like it's, I think, a battle that all of the startups and the direct air capture field fight together. We need to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere. So there, I think, of course, it's a competition on who has the best technology. But I think that all of us need to actually more people need to succeed than just one startup to get there, to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so relevant. Like this is like a worldwide issue. Like all the national governments are also looking at that. But so then what's your like the most exciting part? Because the whole tech seems interesting. What's the most exciting part of your work?
I think the most exciting part is that every day is different. So it really ranges currently between, okay, I'm sometimes in the lab together with my team figuring stuff out, or yeah, doing the actual manual work. But on the other hand, I'm also in the meetings with external partners and really developing the strategy, and like in between sits like data evaluation and thinking about our process and about our absorbent. And I think the variety of tasks that there are is just, yeah, it's just great, because it's not just one thing that I'm doing every day, but like, yeah, basically every day is different. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like a dream to like you can't ever get bored in that situation.
No, definitely not.
And then on the downside, because like of course there's a lot of exciting parts, but are there challenges also to your work?
Of course. So when I started at Greenlyte, like all I had is like leading other people, in terms of experience, was the university setup. And of course, this is a more relaxed and everyone has more time and so on. And then growing into that role of leading a team, that is for sure challenging. It's like it's it's not easy. Some things are easy, but other things are like there are always challenging situation that you need to handle. And I think this is actually then a great place to do that, because we know we're a young team and we know multiple people need to grow into their roles. So there's like patience, and there's also an openness for discussions to really engage into these discussions. And like, yeah, you're allowed to make small mistakes, but then you get the feedback and you say, okay, next time I'll do it better. And then that option to grow is then from the challenge that, of course, I did not know how to do it before, is great for me. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's maybe the cool thing about startups where like you expect it to like, I don't know, like kind of keep failing to succeed in a way. Like maybe you have that space.
Yeah. So one of our founders said, okay, like a day where we break something that is in a moderate cost range, but a day where we break something but learn something is a successful day. So yeah, that was very early on. I think currently we try to not break things, but yeah, like you're allowed to make mistakes, or to run into the wrong direction for a very short time, and then yeah, open the discussion on like what do we do better the next time, and how, like, the important thing is that you learn something from what you did wrong or might have done wrong. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And now I want to go to like back to like the leading part and like leading your own team because you lead an all-women team, which is, I don't know, I think quite unique and special. And if I'm correct, you not only lead it, but you also like had a role in the hiring process. So can you maybe share how you like approach this process and like tell us about the dynamics within your team?
Yeah, sure. So I started or the first person I hired was a lab assistant, because I was at the point where I could not handle all of the lab work and all of the theoretical work anymore. And she is now with us, I think, for roughly a year. So she's, yeah, also has been there quite some time now. So yeah, we were looking for candidates, and we looked through the applications, and the most suitable one was a woman. So why, like, that in the end made the decision easy. So she's, yeah, it's it it's just naturally evolved to that it's being all women. The second person, I actually did not hire myself, but a colleague hired her, and then she moved over to my team. And then there, yeah, you do. And in the beginning, when you do not hire someone by yourself, it's, of course, you need to like talk a lot to get on the same page. But I think this openness to talking and to communicating is something which I really like about my team. So my whole team, when they have something that they are worried about, they always approach me, and we have like weekly and monthly meetings to engage this conversation. And whenever someone is worried about something, we talk about it. And if there's something that involves other person, we like talk about it in a bigger group to resolve the issue. And I think there you will like, or in most cases, when you just talk openly about something that is a challenge, you will be able to resolve it. So yeah.
Yeah. And those things probably help make sure it's like a positive work environment for everyone. And also that probably helps your productivity too.
Yeah, for sure.
And is there anything else you've learned from like this experience of leading a team?
I think there are a lot of small things actually that you learn in the everyday life. I think you learn a lot to interpret like smaller signs of people that they might be worried about something, but you also learn to not like jump on every small thing that people are worried about, because then you're getting yourself occupied way too much, and you do not have time for your own work. And if they really have a problem, or if there is an issue that they want to talk about, they will. And then it's like specific times to sit down with them and then really wait for like them talking, because no one always directly talks, but when you give them a couple of minutes to think about it and just wait and listen, then usually everything or most things come up pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Okay. And so, okay, so companies such as like Greenlyte, which you're working in, like they contribute to tackling the climate crisis because that's the core of like the startup, I guess. But so the sourcing of energy and like tackling climate issues is really important right now, like in our world. So during your career, you have done like research in renewable energies and have had some experience with like EU-funded projects. So I'm just curious, like, what do you think is the importance of like collaboration and multidisciplinary efforts in driving like solutions to address climate issues?
I think actually that it's the core. So the EU project I've been working on was between like big partners like Northvolt in the battery business, but also different academia or then another company in France. So the project was called Sense. And I think what makes it so valuable is that you have like rather quick feedback from industry as well, and from like other universities, because I think what is something that is partly missing in like in academia is that you really have the knowledge transfer to like a product in the end. Because I mean, academia on the one side has this really fundamental research, but on like sides where it's like moving away from the fundamental research and it's really going towards, okay, we want to improve the properties of something that is already quite advanced. I mean, lithium-ion batteries have been around for a while. So with it being so advanced already, I think it's even more important that what we learn in academia is transferred to the industry. And I think you cannot do that without collaboration unless you find a startup yourself, which I think Germans are like hesitant to do actually. So yeah, because it's like it's not the easy way to go. The easy way is to just get hired by a big company. So yeah.
Yeah, but maybe startups are like also essential because I don't know. I feel like in startups you have more flexibility and you can tackle like one thing, while else in big corporations things take a lot of time to change and like have action.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about like your current role and a bit about that, but now I want to dive back to the time in your research, which wasn't that long ago, but in the past you have been involved in numerous research opportunities, essentially in renewable energies, such as your role as research associate in a prominent research center in Germany. So yeah, I mean you've mentioned a bit about it, but what has been the major difference between your past roles opposed to Greenlyte?
So one reason why I did not want to stay in academia was that in academia things tend to move rather slow, and you have a lot of like rules that you need to follow. You have long cycles of okay, we need to submit the idea for a project, and then that gets funded, and then we can start hiring people, and then things evolve, and like 4 years later, you hopefully have results. And for me, I always wanted to, on one hand, move faster, and on the other hand, see the impact of what I'm doing. That's what I was mentioning before, of like the knowledge transfer and the technology transfer into like a real product. And in academia, you don't really have that. So I think this is the biggest difference actually currently, that when I or my team figures something out and we learn something, we can directly say, hey guys, we need to do that differently. We need to change something in the composition for it to be valuable. And then this is like a lot more direct impact and feedback, and you can really see like how what you do impacts the finished product. And I think this is, for me at least, really valuable to see that, and to like not do my everyday work and never see like what impact it has on the overall company. So for us, we really see, okay, we learned something, and then like a week later, it's actually implemented in like what we do in a prototype. So this is I think the biggest difference, that you actually see the impact of what you're doing pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah, to have that value. Yeah. Okay. So now I want to go to like the research you did. So what first sparked your interest in like researching ways to improve materials, like what you're talking about, the lithium-ion batteries? And like how has this research then deepened your passion for advancing cleaner energy technologies?
Yeah, so I think my first contact point was actually my bachelor thesis, where I worked on the thermoelectrica that I mentioned before, where you can make use of like waste heat to generate electricity. And the idea was like so crazy that from something that is waste and that you cannot control, like heat is I think the like the most like the hardest thing that you can control, because heat is slippery, as a colleague from my time in the US described it. You cannot grasp it. You cannot, like, how do you want to hold heat? You can have water in your hands, but you cannot hold heat in your hands, because it's just like particles moving and energy. And I think with this topic being so interesting, but also again then far away from like actually being a product, I think I slowly moved closer to things that could be a product. And with that, like when I decided to, or where to do my PhD in, and I saw for the the battery field, and I saw, okay, there are projects that really work directly with industry, and you're working on something that actually is used. It's not like it's used in a mass market. It's not something that is a niche. Okay, it might be in one barbecue where you have really special features. There are thermoelectrica, but it's used in a like broad scope. And I think to then really being able to work on something that is a product and that actually can make an impact in this renewable field, and also like in my daily life, actually generating the understanding in my surrounding for, okay, what are people working on? So I had the discussion last weekend. Well, are batteries really the future? Do we really need e-mobility? And like it's like a pain in the ass at the moment. And like, I don't know, selling of like electrical vehicles in Germany is currently not going really well. I was like, yeah, but we still need to advance there. We need to on one hand improve the infrastructure, though, so that people also in cities that live in like houses of like 3, 4, 5, 6 parties can charge their car on the street. On the other hand, they need to, of course, get cheaper so that everyone can afford them. But we also need to start looking at recycling. So, or recycling on a bigger scale, because only then we will be able to like supply or to have parts of our supply chain here because we can use what is already there. And I think this is a field where it needs a lot of understanding of people, because you need to shift how you've lived before. With an electric vehicle, of course, you cannot drive 1,000 kilometers in one go. But maybe it's great to do the break every 3 to 4 hours and like walk for 15 minutes, and afterwards you're ready to go again. And it's a lot healthier than just driving all in one go. And I think this is a shift of mind that I think, yeah, that it's just a daily life to have people think about these technologies a bit differently. So yeah.
And like you mentioned, from like that waste going to like lithium-ion batteries, how like much did this research on advanced materials, and how much do seeing the chemical properties and like looking at the actual materials and how to, you know, make them more sustainable, I guess, what role does that play in like promoting sustainability in like energy technologies?
I think it plays a big role, because I mean, everyone knows the discussions about cobalt, about nickel not being sustainable. And I think industry also heard that people don't or are worried there, but also on the other hand, it's of course these materials are more expensive because they are less abundant, and we need to rely on suppliers from like countries that are not all that we're not all like fully on the same page with. And I think this is something, or this has been a major shift during my PhD time, actually, that people moved away from like the NCM materials, where it was always nickel and cobalt for like higher energy density and more and more and more, because this is something that the mass market cannot really afford. This is something that the high-end market needs, and the high-end market can afford. But what everyone can afford is like materials made from iron, or iron phosphate, for example, because this is a lot more abundant, a lot cheaper, and like working on these to improve energy densities there, for like the mass market is also important. I think this is what actually industry realized during my PhD time, because at the beginning everyone was going for like, over here was like NCM, like high nickel, go in that direction. And at the end on the conferences I saw, okay, no, we need to also not forget about the other more like cheaper, more abundant materials, because to like deploy it everywhere we need both. And I think this understanding of like the materials themselves, but also the broader context is pretty important, because you can develop the best material if it's just too expensive and you can't like manufacture enough because there's just not enough like material available, then it's like worthless basically.
Wow. Yeah. So you got to experience that whole like shift in how we source like materials.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now, so you were in a chemistry background, like you started with bachelor's, master's, all in like chemistry, then went into research. And like you said, like it's common for people who start, you know, doing their PhD and postdoctoral and stuff like that to stay in academia. But your path, well, you didn't do that. So it may be like seen as non-conventional, especially going from academia to a startup. But so how did you make that decision, and how did you have the courage to accept that position and go for it?
So it basically was a decision of like, okay, would I do that if I started working and I get used to the money that I earn, or like whatever I'm like situation I then got comfortable in? I mean, if you start working somewhere and you'll basically like, it's not bad, and I guess you just stay there. So for me, the question was, okay, it's a great opportunity, and if I don't do that now, might never do it. So that's I think it's actually great to do something like that at the beginning of your career, because at the beginning of a career is always, yeah, not that easy, or it might sometimes be easy, but it's like it's always the start of a career. But I think when you actually take the courage and join a startup, you have the possibility to grow a lot faster and to learn a lot more in a shorter time, because like the impact that you have is a lot bigger, and you see like how things that you do change things. And you also, at least in our case, get a lot more responsibility to in an early stage. And I think this is for me was the okay. If I do that, or if I have the chance now, I might as well grab that and do it. Yeah. So
Yeah, I love that you did that. At the end, well, for now it's going well. It seems like it. But so then if someone is thinking of doing something different from academia and they start in academia, do you think they're important like skills to have to be able to work in some like a company or startup opposed to just working in academia?
I think there are actually two things. I think this one is thinking outside of the box. So it's like really sometimes what are the easiest ways to solve a problem, and what are the most efficient ways. And the second thing is to be open to like views of like other fields, because when you're in a big company or in academia, you usually have your own field and you're enclosed by people having really similar wording, really similar thinking to what you do and learned. And in a startup, you directly have, especially when you join early on, you have the communication with a lot of different fields. So me as a chemist, for example, with the business people, but also with the engineering people or the manufacturing people. And of course, if you like my husband a software developer, so of course I had some understanding there, and I had the openness to also go down these like lines of thoughts and like how different people think. And I think this openness to try to understand the other person's view, but also to figure out, okay, hey, we do not speak the same language in the beginning, but we need to get there to overlay our languages and to be able to communicate. That's pretty important. Yeah.
Okay, and then if someone's like, okay, so Frederike's career, like that's something I wish to do, like that's my dream, like sort of like role or place to be. If they have no idea where to start, what advice would you give them?
So I think I was really lucky because I was just contacted on LinkedIn. So but that's actually something that I would also advise people to network and to like to put yourself and your profile out there, and just be honest in your profile. You don't have to like whenever you put something there that's not you, people will figure that out pretty fast. So just be honest in your profile and in your interest, and then the more you network there, the higher is the chance that someone will find you. And on the other hand, what you can do proactively is, of course, look for these startups. Look for, okay, say you're interested in a certain field, or you don't know yet if you're interested in a certain field, but you can just look for startups. There are, for example, lists of startups that are evolving, and there's usually most of them are hiring if it's going well. So I think not going the conventional ways of looking at websites of like big companies and looking, okay, they have these positions open, but maybe just typing in like the company or like a field you're interested in and look for like startups or smaller companies in that field, and then just also sending in applications if they don't have a position open, because sometimes people are already thinking about, okay, I might need someone with like where I have a profile in mind. And out of like the, I don't know, 10 applications that you send in, for a lot of them, you might never hear back or not, but maybe one really needs the profile that you have. And then, yeah, that's a lucky spot. And of course, you always need a bit of luck to find the perfect position. But I think it's not just luck; it's also like hard work, basically, and yeah, and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I think that's incredible advice. Like, you can't go anywhere if you don't put yourself out there and if you don't, be proactive, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I love how how passionate you are about what you do and what you're working with. So I wish you the best of luck, and yeah.
Thanks. You're very welcome. That was a great opportunity also to share to share what I experienced. So yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with friends and family and consider giving us a follow or rating on your favorite platform. We'll be back soon to bring more inspiration to your Monday.